everybody, Adam here with Hometown Acres. Welcome back. Seems like Groundhog's Day around here. Every morning I wake up and there's another 2 to 3 inches of snow in the driveway. Pretty much starting every morning doing a little bit of snow plowing. We got that done. But in one of our last videos I talked about why it's important to buy your firewood early. And one of the reasons was because of the weather. And this may come across as though I sound like I'm complaining. I'm not. It's part of the job. I signed up for this when I decided I wanted to make and sell firewood, is delivering dry wood to people when they want it. But that's not to say that when people want firewood is not extremely inconvenient. It is a lot easier to deliver firewood in September and October when the roads are dry and it's 50, 60, 70 degrees outside than when everything's covered in snow, roads are covered in snow, roads are covered in salt, all of that. And since we've started getting snow, I don't know if you can tell behind me, but I have been busy delivering firewood. I've got about 27 empty IBC totes sitting here behind me, all sold within the last 7 to 10 days, which, 27 IBC totes, it doesn't sound like a lot of wood. It's, probably 9 cords of wood, give or take. But when you're delivering it a face cord at a time or a third of a cord at a time, that's 27 separate deliveries. And when you jam pack it into 7 to 10 days, that's what I talk about. The seasonality of firewood is nobody wants it all year long until everybody wants it all at once. And so then you stack bad weather on top of that. And yeah, it's just, I know it sounds like I'm complaining. I'm not. I just wish there was a way to fix this problem and get people to spread their orders out throughout the rest of the year. Speaking of firewood deliveries, we got another one that needs to go out right now. This is one of the baskets that we had stored in here under a roof, so there's no snow on it. Should be a nice delivery for the customer. And then we got to start working on filling up some more of these baskets for next year. Tell you what, it is days like today when I am extremely happy that I've got the truck undercoated and protected. All that salt and slush on the roads, if I didn't have it undercoated, I would just be sitting here just picturing the underside of my truck rotting away. It's also days like this when I'm happy I got a second set of winter wheels and tires to handle the snow. All right, so this customer ordered a load of dry wood and they don't want it in their garage. They want it thrown right here in the snow. They're gonna wheel it around to the back of the house, which I hate to do, but what the customer wants, the customer gets. He said he already has enough wood in the house right now to get him through till January, so this is just extra. He said they'll deal with the snow being on it and wheeling it around to the back of the house at a later date. So let's go ahead and get this unloaded. All right, all unloaded. Only takes about 5 minutes to hand chuck out a full IBC tote. And again, as much as it kills me to throw good dry firewood that was stored in under a roof and was snow-free into a big pile of snow, that's what the customer wanted. Now, the customer has already left, but one thing I always like to do is get a moisture reading on the firewood. So if you ever have a customer that complains that their firewood won't burn, I will have record that I dropped off good dry firewood to them. So we'll just take a random piece here, throw the moisture meter in it. Boom. I don't know if you can see that. 16% good dry firewood. And I know all this stuff was cut down probably in February and it is now December. So this stuff has been down for 9 or 10 months. Let's go home and make some more firewood. All right, so I stopped up here to the shop to warm up for a minute before we head back down to the wood yard. It's about 15 degrees outside right now. It's pretty chilly, but I've got a good story for you on why I moisture meter all of my wood when I deliver it. It's funny how it only takes one bad experience to change the way you do things forever. Now, I have always prided myself on selling good, dry, seasoned firewood. My thought is, if I have some wood that is questionable, I would rather just tell the customer that I am sold out than sell them some wood that might be a little bit iffy, 22, 25% moisture content. Because if you sell them bad wood that doesn't burn, you're gonna put a really bad taste in their mouth and they're probably gonna talk. Whereas if you just tell them that you're sold out, they've got nothing to complain about you other than, I guess in either situation, if you sell them some bad wood, they're definitely not gonna call you back the following year. If you tell them that you're sold out and you don't have any wood for them, They may or may not call you back the next year for firewood. They may find somebody that sells them some good wood, and you may lose out on that customer for life. But I would much rather lose out on a customer because I didn't have wood than to put a bad taste in their mouth and sell them some wood that they didn't like. So I would venture to guess, in my entire career selling firewood, I don't think I've ever sold anybody a stick of wet wood. Very, very early on, ever since I started selling firewood, I invested in a moisture meter, and I typically always check my firewood before I take it out for delivery just to make sure, so I have that peace of mind. Now, even though I always moisture meter the wood before I take it out for delivery, I didn't institute this practice of actually video documenting it until a few years ago. And here's where the story gets interesting. So I had a customer probably 4 to 5 years ago. He ordered 2 cords of wood off of me in September. And I thought, wow, this is great, right? Everything I was just talking about earlier in this video, getting customers to order firewood when the weather is nice. And he was ordering 2 cords of wood a year. I was like, this is gonna be a great customer. He's ordering 2 cords. He already knows he wants to get it early when the weather's nice. And this is gonna be great. So I'm thinking this is awesome. Well, I get a call from him probably in November, and he tells me that he's already burned 3/4 of a cord, which I was surprised by that because it hadn't been that cold out yet. And he's just heating his shop just like I am here. You know, he's not heating a house or running a wood boiler or anything like that. And, you know, he's not complaining, but he's letting me know that the wood is burning fast. And so I said, well, what kind of stove do you have? And he sent me a picture of it, and it's a 1970s model, you know, old school wood stove, right? There's no air control on it. It's just burning up the wood almost like a fireplace. And so I make the recommendation to him. I said, hey, have you looked into these new modern EPA wood stoves? You know, you can really control the airflow, damper the wood down, make the wood burn slower and longer, and you'll burn considerably less wood. Like here, if I damper this down right now, it'll borderline almost put that fire out. You see how the flame really subsides down? There's almost no air going into there, and I can choke this fire down to where there's very little flame, and that wood would last a lot longer. But it's cold out, so I'm gonna crank it back up. So he takes me up on my recommendation. He goes out, and granted, I'm not installing the stove or telling him what stove to buy or anything like that. He goes out and makes all those decisions on his own. He actually installs a stove very similar to this one. I sent him a picture of this one. He liked it. Got one very similar to that one there. So he gets it all set up and starts burning again, and it's probably the middle of January, and he sends me a picture of some creosote buildup in his stovepipe. Mind you, this is after he's got the new wood stove installed and everything. He took the chimney pipe out, sends me a picture of the inside of the pipe, all creosoted up, and then he shows me a picture of the pipe when it was still installed, and he actually had black tar oozing down the outside of his chimney pipe in the shop. My first instinct is that's not good, right? And your stovepipe is installed upside down. The only way you can get that creosote to drip down the outside of the pipe is if you have your male end facing up and your female end facing down, because then it can drip down the outer wall and outside the pipe. Whereas if you look at mine, the female end is facing up and the male sits down inside that. So if there is any creosote that drips down, it's going to go down and ride the inside of the pipe, work its way down here, and hopefully eventually just burn off before it gets a chance to build up and create a chimney fire. Now, I clean out my wood stove once a year here in the shop, and I get maybe a 1-pound coffee can worth of soot, not even creosote, just soot, black ash that comes down out of the chimney, lands in there, and I can usually scoop it up with maybe 2 shovelfuls here with my ash scooper, and that's all the more I get out of one season. And like I said, this guy had just installed the stove in November, and it was January, so 2 months of burning, and his chimney pipe was just about all clogged up, and he was having tar coming down the outside of the pipe. And keep in mind, the stuff that I am selling him is the same exact stuff that I burn myself. I get high on my own supply. The stuff you see here, this is the same exact stuff I sell to customers. There's no difference. Actually, if anything, I burn the junkier wood. I try to take all of the scrap and all of the less desirable species, and I'll burn those myself in here in the shop. So I am having a tough time figuring out what's going on. Why is he having so much trouble? And the only thing I can really think of is, well, he's figuring out a new stove. He's not used to the air control. You know, he was complaining that the wood was burning too fast with his old stove, so maybe he's choking down the stove too much and not letting it breathe as much as it should. and that's what's creating the creosote, because I know the wood was dry. But this brings me to my point with the moisture meter is I know I had hand loaded his load of wood before I took it to him, and I knew that it was dry going in, but I didn't have that, cover your ass documentation of, hey, here's a video of me stabbing the wood that I am bringing to you and it's showing 16%. I didn't have that. Now, he had also complained that he said he found a couple pieces of pine in the 2 cords that I brought him. And I told him, I said, this was way back in the day, 4 or 5 years ago, before we had the processors and everything. And I said, listen, that is entirely possible that a few pieces slip past quality control. And I said, that's another reason I'm willing to bring you another full face cord, because that possibility does exist. I said, I can't imagine it's more than a dozen pieces out of the 2 cords of wood that I brought you, because I did hand load the wood into the trailer that I brought him. But I said, there's a chance that there might be a couple pieces of pine in there. And that is 100% on me. I accept full responsibility for that. The way that I used to do things, like I said, if I've got, a couple logs of pine or something like that, I hate to see them go to waste. I'm still gonna cut them up and split them, because I'll burn them myself in here in the shop. Speaking of which, that's actually what's in the stove right now is 3 pieces of pine. I am on my 3rd IBC tote of pine. And when I told him that there was a chance that there was a couple pieces of pine, he told me that that was completely unacceptable and that 1 piece of pine could burn his house down. And I said, that's just simply not true. I said, that's an urban legend or a myth out there that you can't burn pine, especially here on the East Coast. I said, what do you think the guys out on the West Coast do in Utah and Washington and California, where all they've got is the big redwoods or cedars or aspens or things like that? And so that's all they have to burn out there. And a lot of the guys out there heat their homes with pine. And I said, not only that, but I can speak from personal experience. I burn a bunch of pine in my wood stove out here just in the shop because it's something that I don't want to sell to people. I said the problem with pine is it is an inferior wood, which is again why I'm offering to bring you a full face cord of wood, because it's not going to burn as long. It burns really hot and really fast. And, I might only get 2 hours out of this load, whereas if this was oak or hickory or something like that, I might get 4 to 5 hours out of a wood stove full of wood. So it is an inferior wood, but it is not a safety hazard as long as the wood is dry. A lot of people think that the sap in pine is what causes creosote buildup. It's not. It's the same as any other wood. If you burn wet wood, you're going to get creosote. So I tried explaining all that to him. He wasn't having it. And he said, okay, well, stop over tomorrow morning, moisture meter the wood, bring a full IBC tote with you, and we'll square up and everybody will be happy. I get a text message about a half an hour later that he says, hey, Adam, I keep finding more and more pine in this load. You might as well make it a full cord. So he's saying now he's not happy with me bringing him 1 free face cord. He wants me to bring him 3 face cords for free. And again, if the customer, I always like to err on the side the customer is right. And I'm just scratching my head because I can't imagine. I mean, I try not to make a habit of delivering pine to people and telling them that it's hardwood. That's not something that I do or want to do or anything like that. If there was any pieces in there, it was 100% by mistake. And I can't imagine that there was a ton of pieces of pine in there by mistake. So I'm questioning myself. I'm like, what is going on? So I said, tell you what, anything that you find in that load that you think is pine, set it off to the side and I'll come look at it tomorrow. And I said, now if you don't want to accept the free IBC tote of wood, I said, I will refund you for 1 full cord, which is even going above and beyond. I said, but I'm not going to bring you another full cord of wood. At this point in my head, I'm just thinking that this is a customer that is, you're never going to be able to make this type of customer happy. So at this point, I'm getting ready to just sever ties with them. So I go over there the next day. Guess how many pieces of pine that I found? 5. And if you think, if you've got 3.5 by 3.5 by 16-inch pieces of firewood, you should have roughly 1,100 pieces of firewood in a cord. And I've delivered him 2 cords. That's 2,200 pieces of firewood. And he had 5 pieces of pine set off to the side. Granted, 5 pieces too many. I fully own up to that and acknowledge that there should be 0 pine in there. But a reasonable person would say, that's within a tolerable level of error. I could live with 5 pieces of pine. Now let's say even conservatively, let's say he accidentally burnt twice that amount already before I got there. Let's say there was 10 pieces of pine. That is 0.05% of a tolerable error, in my opinion. And I tried explaining all that to him. He wasn't having it. He was going back to the one piece of pine could burn my house down. And I just, that's ridiculous. So anyway, I did moisture meter all of the wood that was at his house in front of him. I sampled probably 30 pieces of wood. They were all less than 20%, so the wood was dry. I still don't have a reason for why he was getting all kinds of creosote buildup in his chimney. I do know that his chimney pipe was installed upside down, which is why his chimney or his creosote tar was on the outside. But yeah, I just, needless to say, that is the last time I delivered wood to that customer. And I'm not going to say that I cut him off. He hasn't called me back, but if he had called me back, I probably would have said, sorry, all sold out. It's just, I don't need that headache. And especially with this guy getting all this creosote built up and stuff, he's going to burn his house down and he's going to blame me because he thinks that the wood is wet or something like that. So I'm not going to deliver to people like that anymore. It is not worth the headache. It's not worth the liability. And that is also why I always moisture meter and document the wood when I drop it off at customer's house now. So if something like this were to happen again, I've got my ass covered. Now, that is an anomaly. Typically, that is not what you run into. Typically, if somebody's going to complain that your wood isn't burning, it's because they don't know how to start a fire. They don't know how to maintain a wood stove. I know most people that sell firewood have at least had this problem where they deliver them dry wood and the people don't know how to build a fire with kindling and newspaper and all that. And so you'll get the random call here that says, hey, the wood's not dry, it won't burn. And then there's an opportunity for some coaching there to go in and say, okay, here's how you build a fire, kind of babysit them a little bit until they get their feet under them. And if you take the time to do that, you do create customers for life. Now, I should mention, so you don't think I'm just some sleazy firewood salesman, our processes have improved drastically since the old days of doing it with the chainsaw and the splitter. Now it's very easy for me to separate out the wood that I burn for myself, the pine, the aspen, the quaking aspen, the sassafras, all of the less desirable species. I'll throw those on the firewood processor all at once, process them up into IBC totes, put them in a different area to dry as my sort of secret stash for my own burning. And then all of the wood that gets processed for customers is all brought in on log trucks and it's all hardwood. So now I can say with 100% certainty that if you order a load of firewood or hardwood from me, there's going to be 0.00% pine in it. But yeah, that is my story about how the customer is not always right. I will say he was right about the pine. There should have been 0 pine in there, and I was willing to make up for it, but only to an extent. You've got to be reasonable when you're making these requests. I was willing to take him a full face cord to make up for 5 pieces of pine that he had found, but I was not going to take him a full cord of wood. At that point, I was just going to give him his money back and say, see you later. So anyway, let me know if you guys sell firewood. I'm sure everybody that sells firewood has a story like this with a customer that wasn't happy. If you don't have a story like this yet, you haven't been doing it long enough, I'm sure there's one coming because people out there are crazy. 99% of the people we sell wood to are good repeat customers, but every once in a while you get an egghead out there. So anyway, I'm all warmed up now. Actually, I am hot sitting here next to this pine fire. Let's go back down to the wood yard and make some firewood. All right, I'm all warmed back up. Let's go ahead and fire the machine up and start making some wood. No pine on the deck. Ooh, she's cold. There we go. All right, got 3 more IBC totes made. 1, 2, these 3 were already sitting here, and then 1 more over there that I need to move with the mini skid. But all of this stuff here, I've got scheduled to take back up to Matt at Firewood Guy and get kiln dried. I've already taken 8 IBC totes up to him earlier this summer and fall and had him dry 8 totes for me. All 8 of those have sold. And I had a Facebook Marketplace listing that I put out there, and I forgot to take it down. And again, as soon as the snow started flying, that Facebook Marketplace listing started to get hit up. So I said, well, there seems to be demand for the kiln dried wood. I am charging more for it, albeit not enough. Here's what I'll tell you about the kiln dried stuff. What Matt is charging me to kiln dry it, I'm basically taking that cost and just adding it to what I would sell this for if it was seasoned. So I'm making 0 profit on it. And actually I'm losing a little bit of money on it because of the additional travel time, getting the wood up to him, the logistics of taking it up there, picking it up, bringing it back home, and then delivering it is eating into my profit a little bit. I'm still making money on it, but just not as much as my regular seasoned wood. The benefit to me is it allows me to sell more wood in a season by going up and getting some wood kiln dried. If I can take, let's say I take 16 IBC totes up to him, that's roughly what, 4 or 5 cords of wood. That's an extra 4 or 5 cords of wood that I otherwise wouldn't have sold, albeit I'll make just a little bit less on it. So anyway, yeah, that was my story on, a difficult customer in the past. Some people, you can't sell wood to. Some people, they just got to do it themselves because they're just too difficult. So let me know if you have ever had an experience like that with a customer in the past. Again, my knee-jerk reaction is the customer is always right, but in some situations, the customer is not right. So let me know in the comments below if you've had a story like that. Hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, give me a big thumbs up, click that subscribe button, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching.